Alright, back to Matroth, the party's rogue wizard. So last time we painted on the boots, the face, and the pants. Today we're just going to be continuing a little bit on the green concept, bringing greens in and working on different parts of the miniature. So we're going to start with the tunic, or the undershirt, I guess is the better way to do it. So this mini, you could do sleeveless on the arms and hands the way it's sculpted pretty well, but because it's a rogue, I wanted to make sure that almost all of the figure was painted as if it were covered, except for the face. So I'm just doing a different green for the undershirt and kind of tying in with the thought of the pants being a nice wool. This one is going to be like a kind of a utilitarian fabric, so it's not going to be super bright and shiny, but something that ties in to the player's choice of favorite color of green. And because we want to paint a couple of different areas to allow everything to dry, I'll work on the bow. And here I've decided I'm also going to use a triad of colors. So just putting down a tan, and this is a little bit different colored from the boots and the flesh. So different shades of browns being used. And hopefully that shows the variance in the materials from skin to leather boots to wooden bow. And giving everything just a nice opportunity to dry. We're going to move in now on the upper tunic, and there is a bit of armor over the chest of this mini, so we'll paint that as leather as well. But trying to get some more neutral colors pushed in. I'm not going to use greens on it all. The upper tunic, I'm thinking of doing a gray, and that will allow kind of that ambiguity of color to start bringing in more of the rogue-like pieces. Once everything starts to dry, we can continue painting on. This is just a soft gray here. Again, I'm going to use a triad. And there isn't a whole ton because of that armor over the chest, almost like scale armor. It's really on the sides and the like short sleeves of this tunic. And it's hard to tell this gray because the mini was based in gray, a gray primer. But I'm going to put it on a wash and then highlight up to a real light off-white gray, and that'll become more and more apparent as we do the different coats. So Matroth, using his rogue feats and abilities, really more so for dealing damage than the kind of sneaking and stealing aspect of the rogue archetype. Definitely a damage dealer with the party, blending that in with his magical powers from the wizard multi-class. Matroth can definitely get up on the front lines along with the fighters and paladins and just deal wicked damage. In the last session that we did, there were some challenges on his hide on 2 of the times he attempted to hide after disengaging, just because of limited cover. They were in sandy dunes, and luckily one of them he rolled high enough that as the creature was looking for him, the creature rolled low enough so he was able to hide and avoid detection. But the second time he was not, and definitely got a heck of a hit in. But the party, of course, really worked well together to make sure that he didn't get more than one hit in or get taken by one hit. Offered multiple targets for the creature that was attacking to try to choose from, and everybody lived through the encounter. But it was a fun exercise in the occasional futility of utilizing your skills in poor conditions. So it's always nice to have the options of relying on your party mates more than yourself. It really helps drive in some of the progressions of the party. And here, this is just a brown wash, and I'm being really selective. This is a dark warm brown, and I'm putting it where there is like the least resistance on the bow. So those areas will be shaded as well as the underside, and that'll give us a good tone so that we don't have to have a multicolored bow, and it should give a good characteristics to the bow in showing its dynamic, kind of being pulled and drawn shape. And this bow is a little bit decorative in the sculpt. You could easily make this a magical bow. Of course, Matroth has not yet had this enchanted. He has a dagger that he had enchanted, as well as a cloak of protection, but not his bow yet. And again, it's because he goes more for moving in close, dealing lots of nasty damage with a booming blade, and then jumping back from the creatures that he's attacking. So I elected to make this bow just look more like a natural, well-carved bow rather than a magical bow. But this sculpt, definitely you could do some fun things with possibly a glowing bow and some OSL lighting, things like that. This is really actually a pretty cool dynamic sculpt from Reaper Miniatures. And again, with Matroth, I wanted to avoid the all black rogue archetype in this paint, especially because the player doesn't play him as just a thief in the night. So that's why we're going with a lot brighter colors than what you would normally associate with a rogue. And I think that goes really well into having him be a multi-class into a wizard. I don't think he's worried too much about just dressing in all black, especially because most of the party's adventures have been outdoor encounters. So I think it plays really well to choosing earth tones and greens for the color palette for Matroth. And again, the base, a little bit different from the other miniatures that we've put on this mini mastery series. And that's all because the green has been a popular color. So for the players to be able to tell their miniatures from one another on the gaming table, since we're playing virtual, really had to be distinctive. Here, just the wash of a dark green to get into the shadows and the underside of this undershirt. I'm just going to call it his long johns, because he's wearing long johns under his tunic, his armored tunic. And then we'll highlight those up to a lighter green. We did the black wash over the gray for the tunic itself. So it's going more and more gray. You'll better be able to see it versus the gray primer. And the chest piece is, as I said, almost a scale armor, but I'm going to keep it leather for the class. Here, just on that gray, starting to add in highlights. And this miniature here is actually a female, while Matroth is a male. But again, it's just a representation for the tabletop. It's a gift for the player. So because it's not a Kenku, it's not an exact representation of Matroth as a character. just something so we can keep tactical locations on the map, know where everybody's at, and the players can quickly see where their character is in relation to their party members, any enemies, and terrain. But the sculpt itself, like I said, this is a dynamic sculpt, so it's in kind of action. It's not just a posed, kind of showing itself off, ready for a selfie. I like dynamic sculpts, so whenever I get to use them for my players, it's a real treat. You can see here the grays starting to really stand out from the base coat, the primer coat, and starting to get a lot of color on them. Now this video is going to be a little bit longer just because these sections here are pretty big important ones, and we've got a lot of area to cover on this mini. So this will probably be one of the longest videos for Matroth, just because when I sit down I try to paint in a good section of it so that we can get through and get to other minis. Realistically, I could sit down and paint for 8 hours a day, and I know not everybody can just sit and watch a miniature be painted for 8 hours. And just continuing on with the bow, now doing a full-on wash. So we've already started out putting shadows in. This is just going to help blend the base tone with that shadow color, bring them together, and then as we continue to highlight, we'll have better and better separation from the shadow to the high point. And Matroth, I'm still trying to think of ways to bring in the Kenku aspect of the character, and again I'm really leaning towards doing something on the cloak, some type of bird symbol or something just on the cloak, just to tie in the character a little bit more with the miniature. But I want to make sure it doesn't go too much like Raven Queen, so I've got some thoughts to work through on that aspect of it. And of course, as we go through the basing and everything, trying to think of how to differentiate it and make it feel a little more Kenku-ish. But a lot more work to do on just the thought processes on those two aspects of it. Right now, just focusing on a nice, good, clean paint job. And those greens are actually tying in really well. The gray on the tunic, again, with so much primer still showing, it's hard to tell. But as we go through, it'll stand out more and more. The bits of the scale mail, again, I want to have these be leather because of the class of Matroth being a rogue and wizard. I want to avoid any metal for the armor piece. This is almost like just a covering over the front of the tunic alone that is scale mail. So I'm going to just paint it with a leather brown and do very similar to what we did with the boots, of a dark wash and then highlight up the scales. Then some of the other leather bits like the quiver and the scabbard will paint as well in this session. I'm going to paint those like a red, hard red leather. So they'll get a little bit different aspect. And again, I want to have lots of different coloration on this mini. Even though they're going to be in the same family, I want to show all the different aspects of the layers because this miniature has so many different elements to it. So for the darker leathers, they'll be real dark. The quiver, the scabbard, and then some of the belts we'll do in this red leather. And I just start with a real dark, warm red brown and then highlight up to I can't remember the name of it, but it is just a almost like a terracotta color. But the effect is really good on the miniatures, showing that kind of dyed red leather, that hard rawhide leather in wear patterns. So the sword scabbard, which works great because Matroth does use sword quite a bit in his attacks. I want to make sure that that is well defined and called out. The quiver, again, he doesn't use his bow a whole ton because he likes being close up, but he has on occasion used it when he can't get close to a target or when they're spread out, so it works pretty well. And again, a couple of the belts will do the same way. The chest armor and the boots will be very similar in color, just a little more supple leather. And leather is actually one that I have on occasion a hard time painting because there are so many different techniques. So a dark wash onto that scale just to sink in the shadows and highlight the low points, or shadow the low points I should say. That'll sit off real nice from that gray tunic, as well as the gray from the base. I'll be able to see it really well. And again, just add more and more dimension. After giving everything a nice time to dry, it's all just about highlighting. Here's where we start doing blends of that dark brown to the lightest brown for the red brown on the scabbard. And there are about 4 tones that I go through on this, and it's just by blending 3 colors together, lighter and lighter and lighter. Process-wise here, the biggest thing is just making sure you pick your areas, use just the tip of your brush, pull just enough paint off to where you get the separation of color with smooth blending, and call it a day. And Matroth as a character, again, I find pretty interesting in the blend of the rogue and the wizard. Some of the parts and pieces in both attacks and kind of disengaging to really deal out damage, I think the party has really been able to utilize when they're facing some of the bigger challenges, especially in the last couple of sessions when they've gone into kind of deadlier territory. It's really been important to dispatch some of these big bads as quick as possible. So between Dave the fighter, for a time we had Yolva, who was a barbarian, and Ja the paladin, and of course Matroth being able to get up and deal some damage to dispatch some of the threats they've been facing has been very good. I'm actually kind of excited when they're able to get some of the creatures kind of all nice and tight, seeing some of the spell efficiency of Matroth in dealing with multiple foes. And switch out brushes for a little bit finer brush so we can just pick out some more detail as we're doing shading. You'll see I rotate brushes quite a bit based on the size of the area that I've got to paint. But compared to when we started, you can see already so many layers on this miniature. The amount of sculpting that goes in on these is just amazing. The details alone are just great. I like having the differences of colors to call out and highlight the work that the sculptors did. And this is just touching up those boots because when we left off last time we had just done the dark wash. So here we're adding in that kind of wear pattern on the leather, going back to the base color, and then we'll highlight with a little bit more of a khaki color. So it gets closer and closer to almost a tanned leather wear coloring. The technique works really, really well. As we work on Matroth, again, there's a lot of opportunity for us to tie in for player colors as well as different colors because it's not just a sneak by night rogue. Some of the details that we'll paint will have even brighter and brighter coloring and more opportunity for us to explore contrasting colors to really highlight details, have it stand out more from the greens and browns that we're using for the majority of the miniature. But overall, I think Matroth is coming out pretty good. Again, not just a thieving by night rogue, and not just a by-the-book nerd wizard who's studied for years and years, but a good blend, utilizing the similar color pattern to the boots to highlight the scales on the armor. It's working good. Thanks for checking out that video. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure, if you haven't already, please subscribe. Also, if you don't mind getting the notifications, be sure to hit that bell so you can see when we're posting new content. Give us a thumbs up just so we can help reach new audience members. And leave a comment and let us know what you thought of this video, just so we can help create better content and better react to what you need. Additionally, here's another video we think you may enjoy. And, of course, be sure to hit that subscribe. And, of course, please be sure to let us know, where will your adventures take you?